Good day to you all. This here is Alan Gallant coming to you from the Chris Jennings Memorial Hotel Room at the Collinsport Inn in downtown beautiful Collinsport, Maine. And welcome to the 12th episode of Collinsport After Dark. And today, since we're coming from Collinsport, let's talk about Collinsport. Now, Collinsport is a state of mind for those of us who are Dark Shadows fans, obviously. But Collinsport also is a fantastic place somewhere in Maine. There's a reality, sort of, and there's a fantasy, sort of. Today I'd like to explore what it means to be Collinsport, Maine, how it was created, and where might it be if it were a real place on the coast of Maine. Stay tuned, boys and girls. We're in for an interesting ride.
Welcome to Collinsport After Dark. This is a Dark Shadows podcast with your host, Alan Gallant, and of course the whole host of things that go bump in the night. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the latest episode of Collinsport After Dark.
This is an ABC color presentation.
So the first thing we need to do is look at the phantasmagorical aspects of Collinsport, Maine, as a creation of Dan Curtis and Art Wallace and however many other writers were involved in the actual creating of this wonderful sort of dark brigadoon, as Jonathan Frid once called it, from an original PR statement that was made introducing the show to various broadcasters, etc. In Hancock County, not far from Frenchman's Bay, the thriving town of Collinsport is one of many fishing villages that dot the multi-fingered coastline of Maine. Founded in the late 17th century by Isaac Collins, the community prospered through the long years during which fishing fleets and whaling ships struck out from its sheltered harbor. About 30 years ago, Collinsport was discovered as a summer resort. The rugged beauty of its coastline, the fascination of the scores of ships setting out from its harbor, and the feeling of separateness from the world attracted hundreds of visitors each year. By now, Collinsport has grown accustomed to seeing its population of 3,000 swell by almost 50% during the summer months. A small artist colony took shape along the waterfront, and the easel and paintbrush are no longer the curiosity they once were. The many families who can still trace their roots back to the original founding of the village do their best to tolerate the summer people. Main industries of Collinsport are still its fishing fleets, canneries, and allied trades. The main body of its inhabitants are imbued with a strong local pride. They love their village square, their churches, their socials, and their traditions. Although the nearest large city, Bangor, is only an hour's bus ride away, there is a sense of isolation about Collinsport and the men and women who live there. They are a hardy people, formed by the bleakness of the cold Maine winters and the constant danger of a life drawn from the sea. They are suspicious of strangers, but once a newcomer is accepted, he is loved and trusted with the warmth of a family group. To that adventuresome stranger there is much beauty to be seen in the village, but his eyes will eventually be drawn to the large house that looms in brooding isolation on the crest of Widow's Hill, overlooking the harbor, staring out across the waters of the Atlantic. If the stranger asks about the house, he might be answered with a curt, "Gallenwood." If he persists, he might eventually be told the story of that great dark mansion, a story that would almost inevitably be capped with a casual admonition, "Good place to stay away from." Well, there's an awful lot of material, of course, dedicated to creating this wonderful dark brigadoon of Collinsport and Collinwood and all the environs of the Collins family and all their friends, neighbors, and sometime enemies. However, I'd like to maintain the sort of fantasy here and show you a few things that I've created, what might have been postcards from Collinsport, Maine. So, Mr. Music, if you're ready, please, let's go ahead and have a little fun here. Now I'd like to go over a couple of fan-made Collinsport, Maine maps. This one was made quite a few years ago by DS fan Gene Graham, and it's interesting. It's got some rather nice detail in it, a bunch of streets and so on. There's a lighthouse, Widow's Hills off to the side of one of the points. Collinsport Harbor is a protected harbor, and Collinwood is on another little peninsula overlooking the whole ocean. Plus, if you look to the side, you can overlook the town of Collinsport itself. So I found this one wicked fun and wicked interesting. So thanks to Gene Graham. Now, there's a couple of other ones here that I didn't get the credit for, couldn't find it, but I thought these were kind of interesting too. You can do what you will with these, basically. I think they're interesting interpretations of things that have sort of been discussed and bandied about over the last 40 or 50 years in terms of what was Collinsport really like. Interestingly, of course, it's always on a direct access to Frenchman's Bay and also the ocean. Now, here's one that's a little bit more open. Collinsport isn't quite as a protected harbor here. This one was done by virtue of a computer, as you can see. I find that interesting. They've put what looks like a pretty good photographic facsimile of Collinwood in there. And you can see the approximation to the old house and Eagle Hill Cemetery and Old Collinsport Cemetery. And where's Stanhope Cemetery? Well, anyway. And then there's this one, which came from the Innovation Comics of the early 1990s from the 91 series. And it's kind of simple and straightforward, but shows everything that you need to see for the plot line of that particular storyline there. All of these are quite interesting to me, and they don't really discuss the locale of Collinsport, but show the general configuration of Collinsport, which I find to be quite lovely. So again, that first map was done by Gene Graham, and subsequent maps, I apologize, I haven't been able to find any credits for, but if you are credited to one of these maps, let me know, and I'll be happy to credit it to you. All right, that's an interesting and fun foray into the fantasy world of Collinsport. Now I'm going to connect some of the dots from that earlier marketing blurb, that PR blurb that I narrated for you earlier. I believe Catherine Lee Scott's narrated that on one of the special videos as well. It's something that was put out by ABC and Dan Curtis Productions at the time that the show was starting up, and it describes Collinsport to a T. And so I'm going to take off my ABC hat here, my fantasy spinning hat for the network, and I'm going to put on my everyday practical hat when I go down to the docks, do some work, make some money, and so on. And now we're going to look at that blurb now. That blurb has several reference points in it. And also the show itself has several reference points in it that makes us aware of the general location of Collinsport. The first thing is Hancock County. Now, Hancock County is a coastal county on coastal Maine. It is also where Acadia National Park resides on Mount Desert Island. And it's called Mount Desert instead of Mount Desert Island because it was Champlain that sailed up there and saw it and went, "Oh, Mont Desert." So they refer to the island as Mount Desert, although there is a village on Mount Desert Island called Mount Desert. Figure that one out. There are several. Bar Harbor, of course, is on that island as well. The oldest village in Maine, I think Somesville, is on that island. It was formed in the late 1600s. And I actually, as a theater person, spent 17 summers there at Acadia Repertory Theater, which is a small summer stock theater that still exists in Maine. I haven't worked there since the early 2000s, but a lot of fond memories there. Lived right next door to the theater with a host family, and that host family's house overlooked what is the only fjord in the contiguous United States. It is called Somes Sound. It's about 800 feet deep, and it's quite a little fjord right there, surrounded by hills on all sides, and it's quite dramatic, actually. Anyway, so I'm really familiar with Hancock County and that whole region down there near Mount Desert or Mont Desert Island. And being that Collinsport is supposed to be in Hancock County was particularly interesting to me. Now, another thing is, it's supposed to be about 50 miles from Bangor. 50 miles from Bangor, and it's also not on an island. It would be typically right on the coast. Okay. Now we know that Essex, Connecticut stood in for Collinsport on the show, and that's actually a river part that goes to the sea, of course. But the actual town of Collinsport in our show, Dark Shadows, is supposed to be on the ocean. On Frenchman's Bay. That's another little detail that comes from that little blurb that we narrated earlier in the episode. So we've got Hancock County, 50 miles from Bangor, and it is on Frenchman's Bay. Now I'm going to show you a couple maps. One of the maps that I'm going to show you has to do with railway lines, passenger lines that come down to that general area. There was no passenger line by the time the show was on in 1966. So that was part of the fantasy of the whole thing. There weren't any passenger lines that I know of going from New York to the coast of Maine at all by that time. Now, earlier in the 19th century and early 20th century, there were some passenger lines that came down close to the area that we're talking about there in Hancock County on the actual coast of Maine. So right now I'd like to show you a couple of maps and do a little description for you. Now here we see a map from the late 19th century that was put out by the Boston and Maine Railroad, and the Maine Central shared some of these lines. These solid lines are railway lines with little white dots along them. Those are stops. And the dotted lines down around the coast, well, those are the steamship routes that you'd have to take when you reached a certain point. But if you notice, coming from Bangor at the center of the map, going south and to the right, towards the east, is a line that goes all the way down to the tip of Hancock Point. And that is right there near Frenchman's Bay, and is a possible location for Collinsport. Now, of course, that line didn't exist in 1966, but found it interesting to see that it existed in the 1880s and 1890s, probably into the early 20th century. Now, here we see a map from a similar era, late 19th, early 20th century, and you can see the rail route to Portland and Boston that goes down through into Hancock and close to Hancock Point down there at the tip of Crabtree Neck. But then you see some dotted lines, and of course those are going to be some of your steamship lines. Now across the way is Sorrento and Sullivan, and there's Frenchman's Bay, by the way, and we're also going to show the tip of Mount Desert Island here, which is very close to the coast, actually. From the Ellsworth, Trenton area, you just take a short causeway across onto the island. Now, over to the east, we have Sullivan here, and there's also a section down there. You see Gouldsboro down in the lower end there. And Gouldsboro actually has, or had, a cannery. Like the Collins Cannery, it was called the Stinson Cannery. So, based on mileage and locale, my personal belief is if Collinsport were to exist, it would go down this corridor of 50.8 miles to the town of Gouldsboro, where one of the villages, Prospect Harbor, actually had the Stinson Cannery. Now, as you can see, it's also located on Route 1 or 1A in various places, and it runs adjacent to Mount Desert Island. There she is, right there, Gouldsboro, and she is on Frenchman's Bay. Now, she don't have 3,000 year-round residents, but she gets some tourism down there. There is an art community and some art galleries and so on, just as is described. As you can see here, the approximation to Mount Desert Island's pretty close. Although, if you go to Hancock Point, the previously suggested town, it's only about 39 miles from Bangor. This is 50.8 miles, which is certainly within the parameters of the casually referred to 50 miles from Bangor. So, based on all of this, I would say that that Gouldsboro Prospect Harbor area would be a perfect location for our Collinsport, Maine. So that's pretty much my interpretation. Now, other people can have very different interpretations, and I certainly don't mind that. I think it's a lot of fun figuring out different things. So for my money, and I got a few dollars, Collinsport and Gouldsboro / Prospect Harbor, Stinson Cannery and all that sort of 50 miles away, is the best bet for the actual location of Collinsport, right there on Frenchman's Bay. Now, I'd like to spend a few minutes talking about the other end of that 50 miles, Bangor. For those of you who might not know, I was born in Bangor, way back before the show came on the air, back in 1960, at Eastern Maine General Hospital, which is now known as Eastern Maine Medical Center. Bangor's got about 40,000 people in it, in the immediate area, and you go further out, and there's probably 60,000 people in the general area. It's a small city. It's the county seat of Penobscot County, Penobscot being the name of one of the local indigenous tribes. So we named a county after it. Of course, there are several counties named after indigenous words and so on in Maine. But so what I'd like to do now is involve Mr. Music again here and give you a sort of visual overview of postcards and pictures of Bangor, and then go back and talk about some of the locations and how they might fit into the world of dark shadows. Oh, heavens to Murgatroyd, I forgot to change my hat one more time. Back to B for Barnabas, or in this case, B for Bangor. Mr. Music, we're ready, please. 1960s would have been a place of wonder for the old Collins family. Although there was no Bangor Pine Hotel, there was a Pine Tree Restaurant, delicious food there, and that would have been right here on Main Street. As you can see, there's a whole bunch of businesses. There's a movie theater on the left-hand side in the old Opera House. You see those lovely cars from the 60s. Also on Main Street, another lovely place to eat would have been Browntis Restaurant, right there on Main Street. And here's the interior, and this is pretty much a good representation of some of the interiors of the kind of home cooking restaurants you could find in downtown Bangor. Now, at the height of the 60s, Roger would have probably stayed at the posh Bangor house. Barnabas and several other of the higher elevated members of the Collins family would prefer it over any of the local motels in the area. And here is the Bangor house. The Bangor house was operating between 1838 and well into the 1970s before it was turned into a kind of an old folks apartment complex. It had many rooms. It was considered the height of luxury in its heyday. Now, if you wanted to, you could also partake at the bar. And here is the coffee shop inside the Bangor house during the 1960s as well. Now, Roger in the 40s and 50s, and when he went to Bangor, could have gone to the Penobscot Hotel as well. By the time Barnabas was released from his coffin, this grand old dame was gone, unfortunately, but it was one of the big luxury hotels in Bangor, also during its heyday. The Penobscot Exchange Hotel was on Exchange Street in Bangor. On Harlow Street in Bangor, Quentin could have found very posh lodgings here at the Windsor Hotel, which was certainly open during Quentin's original heyday before The Portrait. What would Willie do if he came to Bangor? Well, he wouldn't be staying at any of those luxury places. He'd stay at a more, regular sort of run-of-the-mill place, a nice little place like the Fairmount Terrace Motel on Hammond Street in Bangor. And the Fairmount would have reasonable rates, and Barnabas wouldn't complain too much about sending him there and paying his way on an errand. However, if Willie needed to keep a low profile, there's always the Stucco Lodge Motel, which is a couple miles north of Bangor. Also a very nice little hotel, very modest, and also had nice little separate rooms that Willie could sort of hang out, smoke cigarettes, and watch black and white television. And I think the place that Willie would like the best, however, would be the Riverview Motel, which was about 3/4 of a mile outside of downtown Bangor, again to the north. And the reason I think that he would prefer this establishment is because there was a nightclub attached to it called the Lanterns 4, which had hot 60s music playing several evenings all weekend long, probably Thursday through Saturday at least, and plenty of beer on tap. It'd be like going to the Blue Whale with better music. Here we have another 1960s look at Main Street, looking northward. Here's one looking southward, and you can see that back in the day we had big old billboards up on the buildings. Here's another one looking northward, and you can see midway to the right there's a large building. That's Freeze's department store. And here's one looking southward from State Street. Turned around and headed north, you'd hit the old Lanterns 4 in a mile or so. And there you see the tower of the old City Hall in the distance. And here's the Plaza Motel in Brewer, in case you wanted to stop off on your way to Collinsport. Here's the Holiday Inn in Bangor, just to show that every town has one. And this is the Morse-covered bridge, which is near downtown, I should say, it's long gone now, and was across the Kentuskeg Stream. And here's that City Hall I mentioned earlier, and the big old tower that was taken down in 1969. This is the old Bangor Auditorium, as you can see. It has a rather odd roof. And right outside of the Bangor Auditorium is our own Paul Bunyan. Bangor claims it, much the same way as parts of Minnesota claim it. And this is the water tower on Thomas Hill. It's still there. And here's Bangor High School, which was also designed by the same guy that designed the Bangor Auditorium. He put flat roofs on a northeastern building. I don't know why. And this is the corner of Hammond and Main Streets in Bangor. The top view is from Quentin's era, and the bottom view is from today, the modern era. Now, if Quentin went to Bangor to have some fun, he might send a few postcards to his lady friends and maybe even a few family members if he thought enough of them at the particular time to do so. So a postcard like this would do. And if Quentin was looking to pick up provisions to go further north into the state, maybe on a hunting or a fishing trip, he'd stop here at the market in Bangor. And while he was in town, maybe he'd take in some entertainments at the old Bangor Auditorium on a nice evening. And then maybe at Page's Dinner Parlors for dinner, which would be one of many places that you could go in Bangor in the old boomtown days. And of course, the Bangor House for lodging. It was there from the 1830s on to the 1970s. If you wanted to get into shape, the Bangor YMCA had been built in the 1890s, so it would be there for him. Nice view of the Bangor waterfront, and then the less savory dock area if Quentin was looking for some kind of commerce or congress. If you wanted to go to Brewer, he'd get on the Bon Ton, a little steamer, one of the smallest ones in the country, as a matter of fact. Or maybe he could take a train across if he was of a mind to, but that would be a longer trip, of course. Here's the early train station before the Union Station was built. This would have been during Quentin's time. And there were many, many railroad tracks in and out of the city, of course, at this time. And this is heading north out of Bangor here on the Penobscot River. And this is the main train station, which would have been there in the early 1900s, probably past Quentin's time in Bangor. And this is Union Station, which would have been the brand new train station in 1906. And, of course, you'd pick up your ticket for your train. Maine Central Railroad was one of several rail lines that you could use. And the kinds of locomotives that you'd be dealing with would be something akin to this. This is actually the Knickerbocker Express between Bar Harbor and New York and out of Bangor as well. Now, this is the Eastern Steamship Company. If you decided that like Quentin, that it was more romantic and more fun to take a steamship to Boston, this is how you would do it. And you would jump on the steamer of the city of Bangor, and off you'd go to your destination. Plenty of amusements in Bangor, including this gorgeous green space, the Davenport Park, which had been there from the late 1800s through into the 1900s. Or you could take a walk down Central Street and have a drink, or maybe buy a new suit, something like that would have been available. And then there would also be vaudeville at the Graham Block in Bangor. As you can see, that yellow building there would have all the delights of variety shows. And here's a little downtown view, Hammond Street and City Hall, which was built in 1895. So, of course, Quentin would see that. This is a sawmill, Stern Sawmill. There were tons of sawmills and tanneries all along the Kenduskeag stream that spilled into the Penobscot. Here's the business district. Quentin would probably skirt this in favor of some of the restaurants and bars in town. And this spooky place is Eastern Maine Insane Hospital. Perhaps when Quentin turned into a werewolf, he might get dumped here on occasion. Another view of Central Street and some more shops there. More fun for Quentin should he choose. And turning into a werewolf and hanging out in the woods outside of town along the Kenduskeag, probably a good idea so he doesn't get caught. And maybe on non-full moon nights, you're going to hang out at the Down East Carnival in downtown Bangor. Here we have a lovely little park and a footbridge across the stream there for a lazy afternoon. And finally, another postcard that Quentin could send to any of his lady friends or family members to say he'd been in Bangor. Well, that's quite the trip down memory lane, wouldn't you say so? Actually, Bangor's quite a fun little place. Haven't been there since last Christmas time, but I highly recommend it for a little turnabout. Good restaurants. There's a good theater there, Penobscot Theater, and it's a beautiful place. The last thing I want to show you here is an old-fashioned map of Bangor and some of the sort of highlights of what the town looked like in 1875, which would have been before all the goings-on in the past of 1897, but after 1840. Take a look. Here we are in the Bangor of 1875, the height of the boom era. You can see it's laid out very nicely and very organized. That large body of water there's the Penobscot River. The narrower body heading north, there's the Kenduskeag Stream. They were both very important to the industry of Bangor. There was a logging town, of course, but there were sawmills, etc. And lots of lovely buildings in the middle there, as you can see. It was quite the place and was meant to be the size of Boston at one time. Well, I hope you enjoyed that little foray into Collinsport, and then on the other end of that rail line, Bangor, of course, mentioned many times in the show. That's about it for episode 12 of Collinsport After Dark. And it's good to be back. Been a little while. See you around.